Hi everyone, Derrick Freeland here. Hello and welcome back to my drawing board. Today I wanted to talk about our backer exclusive story for the Chimera collection. This is I Dreamed a Far Country, and this is one of the pages from probably about the middle of the story. And I wanted to show this to you today to give you an idea of how we put a comic book together and how the art comes together, and talk a little bit about sort of the writing process and the design process and sort of the thinking that goes into putting a page together. I think of this as sort of an anatomy of the page kind of little segment here. I guess first off, let me show you this. This is from the layout book that I did for the story, and I wanted to show you this first off to say that this is how I begin kind of the writing process. I'm a pretty visual thinker, so I depending on if I'm drawing the story or if I'm drawing the story, I will actually, this will be sort of the writing process, because ultimately I'm writing in images, and I think of the story in terms of images, and so I like to get the images down first, and then I'll go back in and fill out the dialogue, the captions, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to show you this because this is kind of an interesting thing that happens. There's an interesting thing that happens when you're putting a page together, putting a comic together, and that's the things kind of change from the original writing to what ends up on the finished page a little bit, at least. And so in this case, we've got our character, our canid, Lloyd, who is he's up to something, and we're not sure what yet, but he is on his way somewhere with a package that he's towing around. And initially in this sequence, as you can see, I had imagined that he's going from one part of the colony where he lives to another part. It's this series of self-contained domes, and he's initially so he's opening this door to get to the other part of the colony, and I thought initially that he would just press a button and the door would start to open, releasing a little bit of kind of the air and the atmosphere from the other section of the colony. But that wasn't really super interesting to me, so when I went to actually draw it, I thought it would be more interesting to actually have him turning a lever, kind of releasing the lock mechanism on the door. So that was one change. Originally, also I had imagined this scene where he's waiting for the door to open. The door actually takes quite a while to open because it's this big kind of airlock door, and he originally I just had him sort of sitting there contemplating. They're on this ice moon, and there's a big sort of gas giant looming on the horizon, and so I had him sort of just sitting there waiting for the door, contemplating the planet. But again, that wasn't super interesting to me, so I thought, well, what is he actually looking at if he's not looking at the planet? And then I realized in the colony here, there's actually it's kind of like a terrarium, so there's a lot of natural environment set up inside the domes, and one part of that environment is these deer that are running around. There's a whole colony of deer, and they hunt the deer for food. They use the hides for clothing and a bunch of other stuff. So they're kind of almost the main resource, really, for the canids. And but they're also living beings, right? So they're wandering around, looking, surviving and reproducing and eating, but also observing the other people that they share the domes with. And I thought it'd be really interesting to have this sort of interaction where we have the canid who's more cognitively advanced. They communicate through language. They use tools, do a lot of technical stuff, and the deer are just deer. they're just basically wild animals. And I thought it'd be interesting to have this sort of juxtaposition where the two sides of this, I guess, a community, if you will, are kind of staring at each other and observing each other in this one little moment here while he's waiting for the door to open. And to sort of cap that moment off, I thought it'd be, initially I had Lloyd walking through the door and having that be the end of that segment, but I thought it'd be interesting to look from the deer's point of view at Lloyd walking through the door and just sort of see through their eyes like what this weird world kind of looks like. Anyway, so yeah, just wanted to show you that. Give you an idea about how the writing process goes and all that. I'm gonna start inking here on this page because we're ready for inks. We're ready for brush and maybe some pen work. But before I get to that stage, this is actually kind of a newer technique. Sort of newer, older. I guess I used to do this and I sort of readopted it, but I really like a good kind of outline, or we call it a holding line. And what I've been doing lately with my other projects and with this one especially, is I've been going through and with a pen, I'll outline everything and get kind of some details down and sort of set up the structure for laying the brushwork and the dip pen work. So that I'll be inking with a brush and probably a little bit of this, the dip pen for smaller, more refined shadows and that kind of thing. And probably going to do some Sharpie too, just because, or one of these guys, because there's some of this technical details actually takes a little too much time to do with a brush, and so it's not, it's easier just to do it with a pen. Yeah, so let me get started here. I'm actually going to start with, I like to do kind of the big areas of black first, so I'm going to do, this is basically, there's no atmosphere on this ice moon that they live on, so it's pretty much always the night sky, or what we would consider to be the night sky, so I'm going to start with that. Alright, so we've got the big areas kind of blocked in there with some ink, and now I think what I'm going to do is we're going to come back to the brush, but for now I'm going to grab this pen here and a ruler, and we're going to hit up some of these more technical details, so these areas that are need some straight line loving. So I'm going to start up here, I think, with we've got all of our straight edge shadows filled in here, and kind of our technical details off to a pretty good start. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to keep on using, I've been using this number 2 brush here, and I'm going to go ahead and do pretty much the rest of the shadow work. So this will be the more organic shapes and the shadows on the deer and the canid and a few other places. Alright, we've got our brushwork done and most of our blacks laid down, so now it's time to move on to some detail work. These lines back here are actually a bunch of trees, so I'm going to grab my dip pen here and start in on the foliage for these trees, and then from there we'll move on to doing some more bushes and brambles and stuff like that. The idea with this setting here for this story is that it's this environment that is was originally, you know, constructed, but it's become, you know, over the generations really overgrown and filled up with a lot of, you know, wildlife that was initially there and then sort of reproduced. So now we put all that in. Okay, so it looks like we've got all the black done, the pen work and the brush work, all of our fully positive spaces, so all of our black. So the next phase here is to start to add in some detail, and this book, this is a remake of the very first comic book that I ever made, and so as part of, I guess, maybe an homage to that original book, I'm gonna use, I've been using at least one of the original techniques that I used. The original art was much more kind of mixed medium, had a lot of different pens and different things like that. My newer work is more focused just on just the black and white, the pen and ink work, or brush and pen work. But yeah, so what I used to do was I used to work in ballpoint pen a lot, and the ballpoint pen is great because it's kind of like a little miniature dry brush, and what you get from it is this great sort of mid-tone. So I've got, right now what I have is, you know, this negative space, we've got the white, we've got the positive space with the black, and I'm going to come in and do a lot of sort of shadows and detail with this pen, and that's going to all be done in this sort of mid-tone, and that's a pretty great setup for comics. Especially, you get this really nice, it's used a lot in manga, where you have you know, just the 3 tones. Manga generally uses screen tone and that kind of thing, but for me, for my stuff, I used to accomplish that with the ballpoint pen, that sort of mid-tone. So Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and start in on that. All right, so we've got some detail rendered in here. So that mid-tone I was talking about. Now, on to the final step. The final step is going in with some white ink. This is white India ink, and we're going to do some highlights. We're going to do some stars and some grass and kind of pop in some details where we've got a lot of black and make it work. All right, so there you have it. There's the finished page. With the white, we put in a bunch of grass. There's some stars. You probably can't quite see that because of the lighting, but there's a field of stars here in the background. So this is the finished artwork. What'll happen next is it'll go into the computer, into Photoshop, and I'll do tones. We'll do some what they call, I guess, color holds. In this case, it'll be a tone hold, and like the planet in the background will be have tones, but then just be the tones rather than having black line work. Maybe a few little repairs here and there depending on how I'm feeling about things, and then the lettering. And there you have it. There's a finished comic book page. Thanks for joining me on this little journey. Be sure to be on the lookout for more updates. I'll be doing some more pages here, and we'll be doing talk a little bit more about what's going on with the Chimera collection in the following weeks. And we hope to see you all then.